Welcome, fellow explorers. My name is Christian Alexanderson, and this is Hemlocks to Hellbenders, a podcast highlighting Pennsylvania's parks, forests, and great outdoors. When it comes to rewarding outdoor experiences, there are few things that can compete with seeing a waterfall. There's just so much to enjoy. The mesmerizing sight of water cascading over rocks, the soothing sound of its rhythmic splash, and the refreshing touch of mist in the air. No matter if the waterfall is 5 stories or 5 feet, they're a wonderful sight in nature. And luckily, Pennsylvania has a lot of beautiful waterfalls. We've got all sorts here. We've got big ones, small ones that can be found all year long, ones that can only be seen after a big rain, ones that roar like freight trains, and ones that tinkle like wind chimes. We have waterfalls all over the Commonwealth, from Cucumber Falls in Fayette County to Ganoga Falls in Luzerne County. You can find waterfalls easily from your car or hike miles into the forest to explore them away from the crowds. We have something for everyone, and while TLC famously told us not to go chasing waterfalls, I implore you to. But having so many options can be daunting for some. Where do I start? Where should I visit first? When is the best season to see them? I don't know. So I decided to find someone who did. And we could not have gotten a better guest for an episode on our majestic waterfalls than this episode's expert. I'm excited to welcome Jim Cheney to the podcast. Jim is the creator of Uncovering PA and the author of Waterfalls of Pennsylvania. Jim, thanks so much for joining the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
When did you first fall in love with the outdoors and photography?
Yeah, so, as far as when I fell in love with the outdoors, it's a little hard to say just because it wasn't something that my family and I really did when I was a kid. The photography side of it's a little bit easier. I've been doing photography since I was younger, even entered a few photo contests with just a basic camera and stuff like that. Not that they were any good, but I got my first real camera back when I had got out of college and was just sort of, exploring and, interested in things and all that. My photos weren't very good. They were quite bad, embarrassingly bad to look back on, but I suppose that's, everybody starts somewhere. But as I started getting more into travel in general, I got more into photography. And sort of the two of the outdoors and photography sort of go hand in hand. One of the first things I remember wanting to photograph was really liking those waterfalls with, the blurred water and everything, and wanting to replicate that and take a picture of that. And so my exploration of the outdoors and my interest in photography really just kind of go hand in hand together. And then especially as I started traveling more internationally and getting into travel writing and stuff, I needed photos to complement my articles. Because when you're doing independent publication of stuff or even freelance writing and stuff, a lot of times they expect photos to go along with your work. It's not, like a lot of like magazine or newspaper writing where there's like, oh, a separate photographer that goes out and takes stuff for you, sometimes. So, that's sort of, they kind of went hand in hand with that growing up.
For over 10 years now, you've been the creator, writer, and photographer behind Uncovering PA. What led you to create your travel blog?
So it's a bit of a long story. And it actually starts in South Korea. My wife and I were over there teaching English. This was back in 2010 to 2012. And while we were over there teaching English, a lot of on weekends and things like that, we'd go and explore the country and do things and go to these other cities and towns and find random things to do. And a lot of our friends over there were like, like English speaking friends, American friends, were like, hey, how are you doing all this stuff? How are you finding these places? You don't really speak Korean. Like, how is this, working? So I was like, I'm going to start a travel website just to sort of show people what we're doing. And it morphed into, after we left Korea, my wife and I spent about 6 months traveling from Singapore to Istanbul by land. And over the time, I was like, I'm going to keep this travel blog up, make it not a personal, hey, here's what, here's what I did today sort of thing, but more of very much like what Uncovering PA is today, but very much, but, here's how to visit this place, here's how to do this and that. With the idea that when I got back, I could show a potential employer like, hey, I wasn't just taking 6 months off traveling. I was learning online content creation, social media marketing. This is back, 2012 when those things weren't quite as common and everybody knew how to do those, and things like that. Before the time of influencers and whatnot, travel blogs were still kind of a new thing at the time. And so when we got back, I got a regular job, but I really just kind of wanted to keep traveling. But I recognized that, settling down, wanting to start a family, having a worldwide travel blog wasn't necessarily a practical thing at the time. So I was like, what can I do in the same vein that's not that? And I was realizing that I didn't really know much about Pennsylvania. I went to college in Pennsylvania, but I didn't grow up in the state. Moved into, the Harrisburg area after we got back from Asia and trying to figure out, hey, what am I going to do with, what am I going to do to travel around the state, explore things? And I couldn't really find any information. There wasn't anybody writing about things, in Pennsylvania. And so I was like, hey, somebody should do this. Um, why not me? I'm good at this. I enjoy this sort of thing. So let's go ahead and try it out and see if it works. And that was August of 2013. I've been going well ever since then.
I, like many people in Pennsylvania, consider your blog to be kind of the go-to place for Pennsylvania information. There's not a single time I don't Google a trip that I'm going on that yours isn't the first thing that pops up.
Well, that's good.
Why do you think that is? I mean, what sort of work have you done over the years of all this creation of content to be able to kind of be an authority of information in Pennsylvania?
The thing is, when I started the site, I knew very little about traveling in Pennsylvania. I knew some of the highlights in Philly and Pittsburgh and, a couple of things in between. But for the most part, I started out knowing absolutely nothing. So the site was sort of started. The reason it was uncovering PA was because I didn't know what there was. I was uncovering PA, and just happened to be wanting to share those places that I found with people. And while I started it with the idea that it was, a full-time job and it was going to be my, career in some capacity, hopefully, it was very much like, I don't really know what there is. There has to be stuff to do. Let's figure it out. Um, and I think that's, it's a testament to how much, how many great things there are to do in Pennsylvania.
Sure.
I mean, I'm 12 years in almost, and I still have, well over 100 places I've been to that I haven't written about yet, and hundreds more I'm sure to visit that I haven't been to yet. Um, I haven't been to all the state parks yet, for example. So, there's still plenty out there for me to explore. But I think there's just so much to do. There's so much, interesting things, and I, have a knack for finding those things and hopefully sharing them in an entertaining and, helpful way. So,
Is there an ultimate goal for you with the blog? Like, do you want to visit X number of places or everything that's available?
I mean, I sort of jokingly say I want to visit every place that's, anywhere that's in any interest whatsoever in a travel standpoint, I want to visit there in the entire state. That's sort of I don't think that's something I could ever realistically do. Um, it's just keep finding new and interesting things because, I need to find new and interesting things because I need to put new stuff out there so people keep reading. Yeah. If I get to the end of it, it's like, well, okay, now what?
Yeah. Then you move to Maryland and you start all over again with
Well,
uncovering.
I do have uncoveringnewyork.com as well.
There you go.
It's not as expansive as Pennsylvania since I don't live there, but that's got 300 or 400 places on it right now. So, it's pretty good.
Yeah. The amount of miles that you must have put on your various vehicles going to these places is astounding to me.
It's a fair number, yeah. It's my accountant come tax time is always surprised at how many miles I can deduct. My mileage deduction on my taxes is, what's going to get me audited because they're not going to believe me.
You have a great passion for exploring and photographing waterfalls, so much so that you wrote Waterfalls of Pennsylvania. Tell us about your book.
Yeah, so it's a guide, as you said, to exploring waterfalls in Pennsylvania. There's a little bit over 180 waterfalls in the book, and they range from roadside waterfalls to waterfalls where it's like, hey, there's a stream, hike directly up the stream with no trail for a mile, and you'll find a waterfall. Um, it's certainly not complete. There's more waterfalls out there. It's fairly complete as far as relatively easy to get to waterfalls.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's not a whole lot of those that aren't in there, but as if the ones that are hidden way back in the woods and things like that, there's certainly more out there to explore. But it just helps you. It provides a full color photo for every waterfall, or at least every trail that's included in the book. There's full directions there. So if the big thing is a lot of the information is available on my website. You don't have to have the book, but a lot of these places, the internet doesn't work. So if you want to, use if you want to rely on my website to get there, it gets a little hard if there's no internet. So, the book provides that, step-by-step directions to get there. Um, it has information about the difficulty, the hike distance, the parking area, kind of everything you would need to know to get to all the waterfalls.
What would you say is the best way to use the book? Do you think it's pack it in your backpack when you go on a hike, or do you think it's something for planning and then use it? How do you look at it?
You can kind of use it for both, honestly. Like I said, most of the information is available, on my website online. It's not, there's not really a whole lot in there that's, if I'm being perfectly honest, it's like, oh, exclusive to this and you can only get it here.
Sure.
But the idea was to have something that you could take with you, something that you could take on the trail since there isn't, cell service at a lot of these spots, something you can take on the trail. So, like, okay, when I get here, I turn left and then I turn right and, different things like that. So it gives you that information. But, I've had people buy it and tell me they just bought it as like a coffee table book because it is full color. So there's, photos of, like I said, every waterfall, every trail that's included in the book there. So you can just flip through it and just sort of enjoy looking at the different waterfalls around the state and reading some, interesting information about them.
You cover more than 180 waterfalls in the book. How spread out would you say these are for people to visit? Do you think there's something in every portion of the Commonwealth?
More or less. The book does a good job, and I tried as much as I could to represent every area of the state. The fact of the matter is, some areas of the state, especially in the southeastern corner, there's just not a whole lot of elevation gains. There's not really any waterfalls down there. But everybody's certainly within a day trip of a waterfall, no question about that. The vast majority of them are in northeastern Pennsylvania and southwestern Pennsylvania, just because that's where most of the waterfalls are in the state. Um, but there's certainly ones that are within a day trip reach of anybody, in the state who would, be buying one, buying a book. So
Where can people purchase your book?
the book's published by Adventure Publications, so it's, a regular publishing house, so they have access to, all the usual places online. You can find it in Barnes and Noble. A lot of independent bookstores around the state have it. So, really online, independent bookstores, anywhere you should be able to find it. I do sell copies myself on my website. It's the only place to get a signed copy if you're interested in one. If you go to uncoveringpa.com, you look in the menu for PA shop. You can find the signed copies there.
For folks new to exploring waterfalls, where would you recommend they start? Are there any like first waterfall hikes that you recommend?
Yeah, as far as if you want to do a hike to some waterfalls, there's definitely one of my favorite waterfalls in the state is Buttermilk Falls out in Indiana County, which is a really nice waterfall. Over the years, when I first visited it, there was a short trail to it, but that was it. If you wanted to like really see it well, you had to like cross over the stream just above the waterfall and then go down a really sketchy embankment. Not good, not something I'd recommend. So they've since then built steps down to the bottom. There's actually a trail that goes, you can go behind the waterfall even, which is really cool, under the rock cliff there and go behind it, which is really neat. Short walk from the parking area. The main viewing platform is handicap accessible. And then from there, you have to take steps down if you actually want to get like around the other side and down to the bottom of the waterfall. But it's kind of accessible for anybody depending on your expertise with hiking and whatnot. Doesn't take very long to get there. Another really good one if you want a little bit more of a hike. The recently reopened George Childs Park in the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area in the Poconos. That was closed for 5 or 6 years, I think. It had some storm damage there, and they recently reopened that this past summer. And that has three waterfalls. There's a nice trail, built-in steps and things like that to help you get to the waterfalls and stuff. There's three waterfalls there that are really nice to see. So it's sort of an easy introduction without having to worry about, steep hillsides that, you have to navigate on a narrow trail, that sort of thing, which you can find sometimes at waterfalls.
Finding these beautiful waterfalls can often involve a difficult hike. Can you recommend some waterfalls that involve a challenging yet rewarding hike to get to?
Yes, I think that the obvious one here would be the Falls Trail at Ricketts Glen. As far as, it's definitely a challenging hike, depending on exactly how you hike it. It can range from about 3.5 to a little bit over 7 miles, depending on the exact route that you take and whatnot. But along the trail, there are 21 named waterfalls. If you go in water levels high, there's a handful of other unnamed ones that flow in from the side and whatnot. Um, it's not for the faint of heart, but it's not a trail that is entirely inaccessible either. I mean, there's people who, you know, do it all the time. It's one of the most popular hikes in the state, and for good reason. I mean, it's incredibly beautiful. If you're looking for something a little bit more secluded, something different, the cover photo on the book is actually of a waterfall on Miners Run in the Loyalsock State Forest in Lycoming County. And there are about half a dozen waterfalls on that stream. The first one, which is the cover photo of the book, is roadside waterfall, more or less. So you can see it, just without having to hike too far. However, to see the rest of them, there is no trail. You just have to hike directly up the stream, which can be a lot of fun. The nice thing to me about water hiking directly up the stream waterfalls is you can't really get lost.
Sure, yeah.
You're not, as long as you can see the water, you just hike back down the water. You're not. Now, the book does include an alternate way. It's a little bit easier to get down. It's mentioned in there. But those are a lot of fun. There's, some of those in the book as well that are, like I said, there's not an official trail there. You just sort of have to hike up, especially in some of these, state forests and state game lands where they're not building, necessarily trails to everything like they do in state parks. Another one would be Jarrett Falls near McConnellsburg. Yeah, McConnellsburg. And that's just a really nice one because there is a trail to get there, but it's not one that very many people go to. There's a couple of stream crossings that you have to do without bridges and things like that. There's even wire rope set up to, help you facilitate those, but those are kind of a unique and fun, way to do it as opposed to just a regular bridge. So.
And now, let's hear from our sponsors. Join the Keystone Trails Association's Trail Care team to show some love to the trails you love. KTA organizes hands-on stewardship events and training workshops to maintain and expand hiking trails in Pennsylvania. You can find a trail care event near you. Check out KTA's schedule of events at kta-hike.org. Are you looking for your next adventure? Unlock some of the best landscapes in Pennsylvania with incredibly detailed, highly curated, waterproof trail maps from the folks at Purple Lizard. They create extraordinary maps of Pennsylvania state forests for people who love to explore the outdoors. Find them at your local outfitters, bike shops, and bookstores, or visit purplelizard.com, where your next adventure begins. Refresh your love of Pennsylvania state parks and forests this spring with the Pennsylvania Parks and Forests Foundation. Stay in the know by finding events on Meetup or their website, signing up for their weekly e-newsletter, following them on social media, joining a local friends group, or accessing resources online at paparksandforests.org. Together, we can help conserve Pennsylvania's natural resources, support education, and remove barriers to an inclusive outdoor experience for everyone. Looking for a way to add some local Pennsylvania flair to your space? Check out Sister Sunflowers. They create unique stickers inspired by small local spaces that make your community shine. From quirky caves to hidden local gems, their stickers bring your favorite places to life. Perfect for your laptop, water bottle, or anywhere that needs a little hometown love. For both locals and visitors, there's stickers, magnets, prints, and more celebrating Pennsylvania's most iconic parks and forests. And for the more avid explorers, there's even a hand-drawn poster to keep track of the Pennsylvania state parks and forests that you've been to. Use the code HELLBENDER15 at checkout to get 15% off your first order. Support local, inspire adventure, and decorate with meaning, only at Sister Sunflowers. Shop now and celebrate the places that make your town special. All right, back to the show. Can you recommend a couple of waterfalls for people that want to see something without having to hike very far?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, there's definitely some roadside ones. Probably the most impressive roadside one in Pennsylvania today is Ohiopyle Falls and Ohiopyle State Park. It's not the tallest waterfall by any means, but it spans the whole river. A lot Bushkill Falls in the Poconos is one that people have sort of named the Niagara Falls of Pennsylvania, which I've never quite gotten. I think that title should be for Ohiopyle Falls because it's spans the entire river, of a fairly major river. So that's a really great one. In Ohiopyle State Park as well, Cucumber Falls is another really good one. It's a short hike. Coal Run Falls in Forbes State Forest in that same area. And then up in the kind of the other corner of the state, not to give all the love to southwestern Pennsylvania with that, Dingman's Falls in the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area is the second tallest waterfall in Pennsylvania, and there's a nice, actually handicap accessible trail that leads to the base of that one as well. So that's another really nice one to check out.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered Ohio Pile and we've covered Ricketts Glen on the podcast before with episodes on them. One of the things I love most about Ricketts Glen is that if you want to take the waterfall or the Falls Trail, there's, like you said, the shorter version to where you could see a lot of them. You won't see all of them, but you'll see a bunch of them. So if you only want to be able to hike 3.5 miles or so, you can do that. And the best thing about Ohio Pile is if you want to see Ohio Pile Falls, there's literally a parking lot, and about 25 feet after that, you can see the waterfalls. It's pretty great, just the options that we have available to us.
Yeah, and I mean, the with Ricketts Glen too, if you go to about 4.5 miles, you can actually see all the waterfalls. So if you can cut it down, the official trail is 7.2 miles. But if you start at the top, when you get down to Waters Meet, you go down and check out the three waterfalls below that and hike back up. It's about 4.5 total miles, but lets you see all of the official waterfalls on the trail. So
How should people prepare for visiting waterfalls? Are there particular items they should wear or bring to make their visits as enjoyable as possible?
I mean, a lot of it's the same stuff you'd prepare for, any hike, as far as having water and snacks and the first aid kit and supplies like that. When you're hiking to a waterfall, you're always going to be hiking along some sort of waterway at some point. So you definitely want to have, even more so than a normal hike, make sure you have shoes that have good traction to them, and recognize that around a waterfall, a lot of things can be very slippery.
Yeah.
Rocks. Sometimes you'll step on a wet rock and it'll be totally fine. You won't lose any traction. Other times you'll step on a wet rock and it'll be like a sheet of ice. So, you really have to use a lot of care when, if you are anywhere near the water, when you're doing these waterfall hikes, make sure you have shoes with good traction. If you can have shoes that don't have, that are waterproof in some way, that's even better. So you can get them a little wet if you have to. Um, if you're doing some of the hikes that are more off trail, you definitely want to have a GPS with you or a compass, something along those lines, not just your phone. You definitely want to make sure people know where you're going. Anytime I'm planning on doing some sort of trail that's at all off, any hike that's at all off trail, I always make sure my wife knows exactly where I'm going, coordinates to the hiking trail spot. So, if she doesn't hear from me, she knows exactly where to send rescuers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, my book, that's another essential, of course.
There's so many people that want to go visit these wonderful waterfalls that maybe aren't professional photographers or have great gear. They usually just taking pictures with their phone. How can somebody take a good waterfall photo with a phone?
It really depends on, kind of the time of day and the lighting you're getting and stuff like that. If you're getting to a waterfall and the sun's blasting on it full sun, it can be very hard because there's, even with a professional camera, it can be very hard because there's spots of the waterfall that are super bright, there's spots that are dark. Um, so my number one tip for any kind of waterfall photography is to, if you can, visit on either a cloudy day or when the waterfall is in the shade. That makes the photography that much easier. Regardless of whether you're shooting with a cell phone or a professional camera. With that, if you want to try and get a blurry look to the waterfall, a lot of times you can do that with your modern cameras now, but may want to consider bringing a tripod with you or something like that, just to sort of help stabilize the camera as well.
What's your personal favorite waterfall in Pennsylvania, and what makes it stand out from the rest?
That's a hard question. I was thinking about that. And it's, for the sake of picking one, I'll pick Cucumber Falls in Ohio Pal State Park. Though if you ask me tomorrow, my opinion might be different. Um, it's certainly one of the ones I visited the most and enjoy photographing the most. I think what I like about it is, first of all, it's a waterfall, where the water just falls directly off, the whole way down. It's not cascading down rocks or things like that. So it looks impressive. It looks like what you think a waterfall should look like. Um, it's easy to get to. It sort of has almost like a primeval look to it because there's all these massive rocks there and it's set kind of in a hollow, so you don't see like, any other infrastructure or anything like that. It's just, it's a very impressive waterfall. It's fun to photograph. So yeah, like I said, ask me tomorrow and I may have a different answer, but for today, that's my answer.
How do you think seeing a waterfall, really taking it in, can change the way someone connects with the outdoors?
I mean, I think it's the same way, if you go to a beautiful vista or something like that. I mean, it's something that's just impressive. It's something that, is always going to be beautiful, even if it's on a stream that has, acid mine damage and the rocks are miscolored and, all this sort of stuff. I mean, there's still just so much beauty in it. There's, to think that, that's been created by nature over the years. Whether that's, I mean, there's a waterfall in Tioga County that was created like 100 years ago when there was a flood and it caused the river to re-out and create, so not all of them are, insanely old.
Yeah.
But, something that's been created by nature, something that just has a sheer amount of natural beauty. And then, of course, when you go to a waterfall, there's been studies that have done that waterfalls, the crashing of the water and all that creates negative ions. And that when you're sitting there, are supposed to like, refresh you, re-energize you. That is a real thing. I'm not like, some sort of, ooh, natural, stuff. Like, it's something that there's actual published studies on. It's the same thing at the beach. Why you go to the beach and you feel calm. It's because that moving water creates, these ions in the air that calm us down as, so I think that's what I always love about them is like you just go and it's just like they're peaceful, they're relaxing, other than maybe like Ricketts Glen on a busy Saturday. But and they're just, you really feel like nature's there and you're connecting with it when you're there. So
When is the best time to see waterfalls at their full potential?
usually you're looking at late spring is your best bet. Sometime in early spring, you can still have some snow and ice and stuff like that. So, you have to be a little careful about where you go and what you do. Late spring is usually your best just because of, snow melt, rain, all that sort of stuff, is going to create the most water there. That being said, I probably prefer personally to go in the fall just because you do usually still have, there's a little bit more rain in fall. So you usually, usually flowing pretty well overall. But you get the beautiful fall colors behind it. It's really matched well with the waterfall and the green of evergreen plants and things like that. So, I mean, it's really, I would say fall is my personal favorite. But as far as the best time, most waterfalls look their best in the spring. And some waterfalls, I have in my book, and I mentioned this when they are, but only really flow well in the spring. Some of them can be just a trickle or totally dry, if you go in the middle of the summer and there's no water. I mean, some like the aforementioned Ohio Falls will always have a lot of water, regardless of when you go, because it's a river, and all that other ones, if it hasn't stormed in the last 3 hours, will be dry. So that's one thing. One thing to consider too when you're going to a waterfall. I mean, whether you look up information online or you use my book or whatever the case is, try and figure out if it's a good time to visit the waterfall or not, especially when water levels are really low. It hasn't rained in a while.
And if the particular waterfall you're looking for is in a state park or state forest, call up the rangers. They're more than happy to. I mean, they're boots on the ground. They should have some information about, oh yeah, it just rained or it's not flowing that well, or just call and ask questions. They're always great. If you had to suggest visiting one waterfall in the Commonwealth, what would it be?
Well, I mean, you're asking my favorite, so I mean, I feel like that would be like, I mean, Cucumber Falls. If I, um, would definitely be up there. If you expand the question to one waterfall spot, then I would say Ricketts Glen State Park.
Okay.
It depends kind of exactly how you look at one waterfall. Is it one waterfall or is it one waterfall location? With that one
I'll
trail
take
sort of
all
thing.
answers.
Yeah. So I mean, I mean, in my opinion, Ricketts Glen State Park is unrivaled in the Northeast. I don't think there's any trail in this part of the country that has that much natural beauty, that much to see along, a relatively short trail that, while difficult, most people can, do over the course of a day if they take their time and are well prepared for it. It's, so if you're going to go to one waterfall spot and you're able to do it, I would say the Falls Trail at Ricketts Glen is the number one spot to visit. But if you're looking at one specific, since there are 21 there, Cucumber Falls is definitely up there. Raymond Skill Falls and the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area is the tallest waterfall in Pennsylvania, though it's broken into two waterfalls. So I question that a little bit because the waterfalls are far enough that I feel like it should count as two waterfalls, but officially it's the tallest waterfall in Pennsylvania. So I feel like I should mention that in the same breath as is this as well. And while I made a comment earlier, kind of questioning Bushkill Falls up there in the Poconos as well as the people calling it the Niagara of Pennsylvania. It's a very impressive waterfall as well, 100 feet tall. It's pretty much, other than I suppose Falling Water, where the Frank Lloyd Wright House has the waterfall there. It's the only other one in the state, I believe, that you have to pay to see
Oh,
because
okay.
it is on private property. So you have to pay to go to Bushkill Falls. But I mean, there's a ton of free ones up there to see. But if you have the time and the money, Bushkill Falls is another amazing one.
Other than the ones that we've already discussed, do you have any other state park or forest recommendations for people that might want to see multiple waterfalls during one trip?
Yeah, there's a fun waterfall trail at Salt Springs State Park, which you mentioned earlier, that has three waterfalls. The trail there, the official trail, has you climbing up the waterfalls. I mean, they're not tall waterfalls. The footing's pretty good. But that's a really nice one to go to. There's a bunch more in the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area that I haven't mentioned. If you get the Loyal Sock State Forest, there's a ton of waterfalls as well. Dry Run Falls is a roadside waterfall that's quite beautiful. It was, I believe, the first waterfall I ever went to in Pennsylvania. Not 100% sure about that, but as far as I can figure, I think that was the first one I went to.
That's the first one I ever went to.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's easy. It's right there. It's roadside. It's, um, Angel Falls up there is kind of hidden, but is a really impressive water. Well, not really hidden, but a lot of people don't go to it, especially the get down to the bottom of it. That's another really impressive one. There's really, I mean, the great thing about Pennsylvania is, we don't have, you go up to New York and there's like, it seems like every town has their own little 100-foot waterfall in the Finger Lakes. Um, we don't have quite that impressive number, but we have a ton of variety just sort of around the state, whether you want hard ones to get to, easy ones to get to. Um, and a lot of them are incredibly beautiful. And, the huge ones are impressive, kind of initially, but just as far as sitting and relaxing and enjoying, I prefer, a 15-foot waterfall in the middle of a state forest to, a 100-foot waterfall that's, not, it has a lot of people at it.
Jim, where can people follow you on social media?
I'm on most social media as Uncovering PA. Not all of them, but I'm most active on Facebook, and then Threads as well is where I'm most active. I do have an Instagram and YouTube. I don't really update those too often. Um, I do also have on Facebook a Jim Cheney photography page where I share more of, just photos on there. And then, as I mentioned before, I have Uncovering New York as well. That's on Facebook primarily. So,
Jim, thanks so much for talking to us. We really appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot.
I want to thank my guest, Jim Cheney, for joining the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Meta for more information about upcoming episodes. You can support the podcast by buying merch at hemlockstohellbenders.com, or you can click support this show in the podcast description to provide a monthly donation. This has been Hemlocks to Hellbenders. I'll see you out there. Hosting, production, and editing by Christian Alexanderson. Music by John Sauer. Graphics by Matt Davis.